Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Fusebox AMA. My name is Chris Chowan, and I'm the Emerging Technologies Coordinator here at WiredSussex. I'm really excited today to be joined by VR artist, designer, animator Angie Taylor. She can explain a lot more about herself now if I hand over. So, Angie, you can introduce yourself, please.
Hi there. Hi. Yeah, it was funny actually this morning because I read your post and it said creative technologist, and I thought actually that's a quite a good description. I've always struggled as how to
I was
say
actually
what I
hoping
do.
I was actually hoping to find that description on your website so I could use it, and I didn't. I was like, I swear that's a good term. Yeah,
Yeah, I have to put it on there.
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, what do you want me to just to say a quick intro and
yeah. I mean, well, maybe if you start off with your sort of background and how you ended up working digitally, and then we can look at what you're
okay.
doing now as well.
Okay,
Does that
yeah,
work?
I started off by doing a degree in sculpture and drawing at art college. Left art college and thought, what the bleep can I do with a sculpture degree? So I thought, well, it's either making gravestones or prop making. So I opted for the prop making, moved down to London, worked as a prop maker for a few years. And while I was dropping off props at the BBC one day, I saw someone using Photoshop 1. I think it was the early beta. And I was like, wow, what is that? I want to do that. And I was also DJing at the time, so I then saw sequencers like Cubase One,
Hmm.
got into sequencing, and then started thinking about sequencing images. And Deluxe Paint was the first bit of software that I used on an old Amiga, and that's how it started, basically.
Right, and so through the years, you sort of hone the skills, and because I know that you've done some training work as well, so I presumably over the years you've sort of become an expert on all these different platforms as they've evolved. Which
Yeah, I
I
mean, I was quite lucky because I got in there right at the start. When things were just developing, so I've kind of understood it from a very early stage. And
mm,
I'm just naturally inquisitive. I like to know how things work. So, as well as liking to be creative, I also like to know the underlying technology as how it's working. So,
it
that's kind of driven me to learn more about it, I suppose.
it's actually quite impressive to think. Yeah, if you started just as with Photoshop One, you really have sort of been around for pretty much all the iterations of the different software to see them advance, which is a really cool place to come from. Where a lot of people getting into the scene now, they're presented with all these tools in front of them that they have
Yeah,
no
I mean,
experience with and no understanding why those tools even exist in the first place in some cases.
exactly, and even the terminology. Like, so I worked on animation and images and photography at art college when we were using real dark rooms, and
Hmm.
I know where the terms dodge and burn come from and things like that. So that really helps that when you're using the software, you know what those terms mean. A lot of people that have just learned Photoshop, for example, they won't understand what those terms mean or where they come from. So I
Yeah.
think having an analog background is useful as well. Sorry about the phone ringing in the
No worries.
background.
Work from home. This is what happens.
Yeah.
Well, I should add here. So if anyone who's watching live has any questions for Angie, please do put them in the chat. I'm happy to sort of pass on the questions, and we can try and get any audience submitted questions through. But I also have a nice list of pre-prepared questions that I thought would be interesting to cover. One of the things I actually would like to hear about is some of the people that you've worked with in the past. Um, has there been anyone particularly like? There must be some. There's some interesting like projects you've worked on. So there must have been some people you've met along the way.
Yeah, I suppose the most notorious project I've worked on was Rubber Johnny, which was a collaboration with Chris Cunningham. It was Chris Cunningham's project, but I worked on it doing After Effects and animation. And I was basically in a basement in Glassworks in Soho for a year with just me and Chris working on this project. And that was pretty heavy
Yeah.
going because it's yeah, he's a very intense artist and
Right.
very precise and particular about how he wants things done. So there was a lot of trial and error. It was a
That
3-minute video,
that
but we
sounds like
worked on
a
it for over a year.
sounds like a tough apprenticeship at that point with the level
Yeah.
of yeah. That's where you learn though. Um, and then
Uh, I worked with the slits as well, which was a really a great thing to do. I
Of
did
course.
sort of some live directing and producing of gigs and stuff. So I did the Meltdown Festival for them. And then I ended up doing directing and producing the Woman of the Year Awards for Joan Armour Trading, which was bizarre. That was
Interesting.
at a time in my career where I just did anything I was asked to do. It was like, oh yeah, I can do that. I can do that. But
Yeah.
then I quickly realised that's not what I wanted to do. So
And then mentioned the people, but then also, and we've also spoken about some of the tools and things over that history of them evolving. Are there? I mean, for you, obviously, I feel like Photoshop version 1 sounds probably one of the most significant because that's what got you interested in the first place. But what? And explain this to me because I'm a little bit inexperienced here. What were the groundbreaking softwares, and what was the updates that really like where people, technology moving on, where it really started to
yeah, for me, After Effects was a big game changer. After Effects was unlike any other piece of software I'd seen before. It was basically took everything that I knew about Photoshop and freehand, which I was using at the time, which now it's Illustrator, and like allowed you to animate that over time. But it also combined that whole digital darkroom thing, so you could do compositing, visual effects, animation, motion graphics, everything. And there was nothing like it at the time, and there still isn't really anything like it.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing. And I think version 5 was the big groundbreaker for me because it introduced 3D and expressions, which just pulled After Effects in a whole new direction. After Effects, I feel, is kind of going through one of its not so great periods at the moment. It's since Adobe have started releasing all the software at the same time. It seems to have lost its way a little bit, but it's still, for me, I can go into After Effects and find new things to do every time I use it. It's the most creatively flexible bit of software. Other things, I mean, Final Cut Pro, I think, was a huge game changer for a lot of people as well. And it pushed the other software companies like Adobe to really improve their video editing products.
There's one software which I've heard you mention quite a lot, and I hear it come up every now and then. I still don't know exactly where it fits in. That's Davinci Resolve.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What sort of tool is that, and where does that fit into the?
Resolve's kind of, it comes from a kind of more compositing and color correction direction, but it's evolving into a lot more than that. You can work in 3D, you can do motion graphics in there, and a lot of people are moving over to Resolve. I kind of feel like I'm going in a different direction from that now, so I don't feel like I did motion graphics for 25 years, but now I'm kind of more focused on VR. So I haven't really got deeply into Resolve, but I know that's where a lot of the friends that I used to work with are going now, is towards Resolve.
Interesting.
And also Unity and Unreal Engine, I think, are the future of a lot of the creative software.
I was about to bring those up, actually.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you've seen the Unreal Engine 5. They've just released their technical trailer for that. And some of the stuff that you've seen in there, that's absolutely game-changing for movie production, game production, everything.
It is. It's pretty incredible. I'd love to see more tools in there for like UI design and things like that as well.
Absolutely.
But I think they need to build UIs for designers that allow you to work within those tools more easily.
Yeah, it's not there should be two versions, but you know how in like Premiere, when you can go between like editing mode and arrangement mode, and different modes with different layouts. I feel that's the way they could approach it, is where they have sort of a more code orientated view, and with a quick click of a button, you have suddenly the more like design orientated view. So depending on what side of the project you're coming from, it's accessible to both.
Yeah, it's funny because during the over the years, I've often mentioned to people that I would love to see Adobe doing a more modular software system. So instead of having, different applications that do different things, you just have different modules that you take and plug together to make your own application. And that's really, I think, what's happening to Unreal Engine.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, Unity and also Godot Engine is worth looking at as well in terms of the future, because it's open source and I think it could be developed similarly to Blender.
Yeah.
Blender as well is amazing. I mean, I think the open source stuff is really pushing the boundaries at the moment, much more than the software companies are.
Then the other thing I thought we'd look at was your time on the ArtStrive program. This is where I actually got to meet you. So, Arts, maybe you're probably in a better position to explain where you came from with ArtStrive and how you found the program and how you got involved.
Yeah, so it's been a massive life-changing experience for me, basically. What happened was I'm kind of a bit of an introvert who was in an extrovert's body. So I used to be out and about doing demos and stuff, and then quickly realized that actually it causes me a lot of stress. So then I'd kind of started retreating back and doing just one-to-one training and being a bit more private. But I kind of felt like I needed to get out a bit more and network. So a friend of mine sent me an email and saying, oh, there's this thing on in Brighton. I thought you might be interested. And I opened it up and it was ArtStrive, VR art. Come along, see if you want to be a part of it. And I was like, well, I'm not into VR, but I'll go anyway because it might be good for networking. And I went away, came along really nervous and thought, oh, well, I might meet people, da, 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 da. And you came on and demoed like tilt brush and stuff. And I was like, because I'd kind of I'd seen VR years ago, Lawnmower Man times, and kind of tried it then and thought, yeah, this isn't for me, massive heavy thing on your head. And I'd kind of dismissed it after that, thinking, oh, it'll just be like 3D, kind of flash in the pan thing.
Yeah.
But actually it was, when I put on the headset and tried Tilt Brush, I was just absolutely blown away by being able to be in the middle of my creations instead of like looking at a 2D screen and trying to manipulate that to do what I wanted.
Exactly.
I was actually in there. And because I did sculpture, it was just natural for me to understand my way around that 3D modeling kind of thing.
So that's actually where one of the things I always describe Tilt Brush as not it's VR painting is how they sort of market it, but really it's VR sculpting, because I feel like a painter would feel less at home than a sculptor would in that type of environment. And it was actually why when you jumped, I remember when we had our first open day and you were there. I remember you standing out in my head so distinctly because you were lying on your back on the floor, drawing in the air above you. I was like, okay, this is someone who I think that we can work with. I like this. And yeah, seeing even on your first attempts, you already exploring all the settings, changing environments, things which I was like trying to nervously tell people to avoid just in case they broke something. And you had this whole new like design style that I hadn't seen, which was sort of like a black ink on a white canvas at the time. Which now, sorry, I do copy every time I demo Tilt Brush because it makes my stuff look so much better.
Yeah. I suppose I just naturally want to try and break things, which is quite useful.
Yeah. Actually, Sarah Tico in chat says, "I'm glad you joined the Fusebox, Angie." And do you have any?
Hi, Sarah.
Do you have any favorite XR artists or creators out there?
Yeah.
And how do you feel you're harnessing the medium in interesting ways? There we go. That's a proper worded question.
Yeah, some of my favorite artists. Danny Bittman is an amazing VR artist and does some amazing tutorials as well on YouTube and stuff. Sutu Nals. I don't know how you pronounce that, but it's SUTUNAWLZ. Is brilliant artist.
Okay.
Anna Dreambrush obviously is, although her style is very different from mine, I think she's amazing, and I think the artwork she does is amazing.
On the front of Anna, I think she was the first person that I started to see going sort of viral because of it, and that's where I realised that this sort of game that I introduced people to to play around with and draw stickmen was actually a medium.
Yeah, and then there's also artists like Laurie Anderson is doing really amazing stuff in VR. Bjork's obviously doing stuff. Also, there's a guy called Martin Neblong who does amazing art in Dreams, which
All right.
is the PlayStation game.
I
And there's
remember
some really interesting stuff being done in that as well.
you weren't the only person on ArtStrive actually utilizing Tilt Brush either, because we had Zach, who was
That's right.
building a AR experience and creating all the assets in Tilt Brush.
I'm actually collaborating with Zach on a project now.
Ah, excellent. And that's lasting impact of ArtStrive we like to see. uh, excellent. Hopefully that got your question, Sarah. Plenty of people to go looking after now. And actually, yeah, on the note of the VR tools, then, how far along do you feel they are? Are they like where? Since you've seen the history of sort of the software tools and the sort of desktop side, do you feel like we're really early days still, or do you think that there's a fully developed toolkit available now?
No, I think it's fairly early days. I think there's so much more that you could do in VR. Like VR compositing would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the 3D applications, being able to work in VR in those would be great, like Cinema 4D, working properly in VR would be great. So yeah, and even the tools that are there, like the painting and sculpting tools, could be improved massively, and there's loads of new features that I think of all the time. Oh, I wish it could do this, and I wish it could do that. There doesn't seem to be one thing Adobe does really well is they've got a really good beta program, pre-release program, and I think it would be great to see a more open-friendly pre-release program for some of these apps,
Mm-hmm.
because they tend to be a bit cliquey and closed.
Yeah.
That's one thing Adobe does really well is community stuff.
Yeah. And actually, I think Tilt Brush is probably the one of the best equipped for that. Is because they've got the Google backing. But we did have some of the Google Tilt Brush devs talk at an event, and they were sort of saying that the team has gone down massively in size there. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I think there's only a handful of them working on it now.
Yeah, I don't know how profitable the VR tools could be, and that's probably why it's going to be a niche market at the moment, I expect. I don't even know what Adobe are doing with Medium. It's been very hush-hush, so I'd love to get involved in that as well. But yeah, I don't really use Medium as much. I use Masterpiece VR, so...
Mm-hmm. I think one of the problems is that if you need the really advanced tools, sort of, the full Adobe suite level, even because Adobe is still fairly expensive, subscription monthly.
Yeah.
But this would have to be even more expensive than that to make up for the far smaller audience.
Yeah, well, Substance, you still have to pay separately for a Substance subscription on top of your Adobe subscription. So I would imagine that they'll do the same with Medium.
Yeah, it does. It also highlights how incredibly good value Tilt Brush is as a tool that you can get going with right away.
If you're prepared, if you think selling your soul to Google is a cheap price, then yes.
Yeah. I mean, the Google Earth VR is my favorite VR application ever, and I think that one's basically they've sort of halted support for it completely, which is really sad because that's probably the biggest seller of VR to people is showing them Google Earth and letting them go anywhere.
I tell you, a really good new one that you'll love is Color Space.
Color Space.
That was designed by Danny Bittman. It's coloring in books in VR. It's amazing.
Ah. Okay, I will have a look at that. Yeah, because I have a couple of the extent of my artistic ability lends itself to those iPhone apps where you tap to fill in the squares with the colors. That's a bit depressing. So yeah, I'll have a look at that.
Yeah, it's worth checking out.
Yeah, and then so after the Arts Driver program, because I now see on your website, you're listing as VR artist now, so it's definitely taking that back on board. And then have you? Because you also do teaching under Creative Cabin, so how does that tie in? And are you now adding immersive into your sort of curriculum?
I am, yeah. So I teach kind of one-to-one courses in things like After Effects and Cinema 4D, Photoshop, Illustrator, but I also do like homeschooling for kids and things. And particularly young people are really interested in VR. So I've had a couple that have said they want to learn Photoshop, for example, concept art, how to do concept art. And then they've said, oh, I'm thinking of getting into VR. And I'm like, I could show you VR. And suddenly the training changes. So I managed to figure out how to stream live and do all that. So I do tilt brush and gravity sketch workshops for kids.
I think I could use that.
Yeah, it's
Proper.
been really good, and it's actually really quite easy to do online. It works really well. I just stream it through QuickTime Player to my iPhone,
Okay.
and that way you can just stream it really quickly and easily.
Clever. Yeah. I think there's going to need to eventually be like a way for people to learn these tools, because again they can only get more complicated and more extensive as we go on.
Yeah, Danny Bittman's got a really good, because I was thinking of doing a course online, and then I thought actually Danny has done the best course online. There's no point really, and it's how to be a VR artist, and it covers all the tools, and he even teaches things like composition in VR, how to work out composition in 3D and VR and stuff.
Okay,
it's a really good
that's
course.
Another thing for my reading list. Good. Yeah, and the other thing is with the sort of even the non VR side. I think at the moment there must be so many parents that are going crazy with their kids and need an outsource. So if I think anyone watching who's dealing with kids at the moment, there you go, go see Angie. Not only will I have fun
just
with
go
the
to Creative Cabin.
There we go. That's a plug, and absolutely right. So,
and I love it. It's just like it's really like. It feels like when I used to have my mates round when I was little.
Mm-hmm. What's it like following your students afterwards as well? I presume you get to see people go off and explore and play with the tools and make their own mistakes and learn.
Yeah, and I have a newsletter, and I also, like, all my training includes support. So basically, if someone comes to Creative Cabin for training, they're then part of the Creative Cabin family. So if they're working on a project and they get stuck, they can call me and
nice.
I'll just help them. So I see, when people ask me for help, I see it as a learning opportunity for me as well. So it's all valuable to me.
Mm-hmm.
So even though I'm taking time out to help them, it's a learning thing for me as well.
I've got Ali Garden in chat who's asked, "Hi Angie, do you ever use Blender?"
Hi Ali. Occasionally I use Blender, but I've been a Cinema 4D user for many years, so I tend to feel more comfortable in Cinema 4D. But I use Blender a lot for sculpture. I've been doing some kind of head sculptures, traditional kind of photoreal head sculptures, and Blender is amazing for that.
I find it, because I find it amazing the gulf in pricing between Blender and say Cinema 4D, and how for a lot of people can get by on Blender. I don't know where the competition lies in there. Where to Cinema 4D pull ahead?
Well, I guess the stability, because things are tested more rigorously. Whereas with Blender, because it's being developed continuously, if you're going to go between point releases, then you're kind of working with less stable software in a way. But
same with Unity,
the great thing about Blender is they can take chances with features that people like Maxon can't.
Mm-hmm.
So they can say, oh, let's try this. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. Whereas Maxon, if they try something new, it's going to cost them a lot of money if it doesn't work. So it's really difficult. And I have kind of mixed feelings about it. I love open source and I love people being able to get software free.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I really recognize the talent of the teams that, like the people at the After Effects team and the Maxon development team are some of the most amazing people I know, really like hugely talented, hugely creative, and technically like their knowledge is unsurpassed.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think of them being supported. So although I hate investor-led companies, I still think they have a place, and I'm not sure how that's going to work out in the future.
I remember it wasn't until after I'd started using Unity that I felt comfortable to look at Cinema 4D again, or Blender, because for me the whole 3D nature got very confusing. At some point I'm gonna have to bring up some of the old creations that I've got locked away in a vault. Uh,
Yeah, I'd love to see them.
then one of the things you've been doing to keep busy recently is, and you've been accepted on something called Super Rare.
Yeah,
And now I am quite interested in crypto, so if you want to go ahead and explain how that works, it's quite an interesting platform, and some people might be quite interested to hear about it.
yeah. So I'm kind of new to it as well. So I'm describing it as I understand it. So basically, a friend of mine posted something on Twitter that they've been accepted as an artist on Super Rare selling their artwork. And I thought, well, things are a bit tough at the moment financially, so I'll have a look at it as an option. And I've been looking at trying to get back into doing fine art as opposed to design anyway. And I wanted a way of being able to exhibit my art, really. But then the thought of selling it and exhibiting it was really interesting. So anyway, basically, it's a way of tokenizing art, your artwork and attaching it to a cryptocurrency, which makes it a collectible asset, basically. So, yeah, Ethereum is the cryptocurrency that can be tokenized. And basically, you do your art, you upload it, and you tokenize it so it's attached to that currency. So it has a value. And you can put it up for auction or you can have a buy it now price. So if it goes up for auction, people will just bid for it. And then because it's attached to this cryptocurrency, it can't be copied. The ownership
The
can be
original can't
proved.
be anyway.
Yeah, yeah. But the rights as well.
Yeah.
And it means that, so you can use it as a collector, you can use it as a way of investing in cryptocurrency, but having an interest associated with it. So you're collecting artwork, and the cryptocurrency will go up or down in value, which is attached to it, but also the collectability will change its value. So if someone becomes really collectible, then people will want to buy that artwork, so they'll offer money to the collector. And if the collector sells it, then the artist still gets 20%. So it's a kind of win-win for artists.
Yeah.
And it's also a more interesting way for collectors to build up a portfolio of cryptocurrency.
Interesting. Yeah, there's because there's been some really interesting projects leading out from the crypto stuff. So it was only a matter of time before it got applied to art. I think that's also one of the things people have a struggle with crypto is the fact there's nothing there behind it. There's no substance. So having an artwork attached to it is quite a unique point for a lot of people. I think that would help people get over that hurdle.
Yeah, yeah, and also I think the collectors can then, it's like they then can develop their own kind of taste, and people go to them to find artwork. So they also become curators, and they become well known for being, someone who buys really nice artwork. So in a way, they're developing their personality as well as the artist developing their personality.
Yeah,
and you can be an artist and a collector. Like I want to buy one of my friend's artworks. So.
Yeah, no, that could definitely be a market. You just need to get people into it as well. So sharing the word is probably one of the key things.
It's really growing. There's Super Rare, and there's another one called Known Origin.
Clever name.
So, yeah, if you're having a look at the website, so I recommend looking at the trending or top-rated artists, because there is a lot of stuff on there, and there's some that's not, depending on your taste.
Yeah.
You can also look at it based on categories. There's sculpture, digital art, traditional, blah blah blah.
Yeah. Interesting. And then, so again, if anyone in chat does have any questions at all, I've been trying to do my best to pass them on to Angie. So feel free. We're still here for plenty of time. So if there's anything you do want to ask, let us know. I've got a little bit of a wild card question, which I didn't prep you for, I'm afraid.
That's okay.
One of the technologies that I'm really interested in, because we've talked about immersive, we talked about crypto, so I feel like the only thing I can talk about now is deepfakes.
Yeah.
Have you seen any of that sort of? Because also, I've started to see films and things starting to use deepfake technology in place of practical visual, or in place of visual effects that they would have done normally, like face replacement and things. How do you do you see anything interesting in that technology for you, or sort of
I
interest?
find it interesting in a way. It's funny because when I started doing prop making, I had to make things look ultra real.
Hmm.
Like, that was the focus, was to make things that looked real. One of the jobs that I had was working at a place called Replica Food, and we
Hmm.
had to make things like pigs on spits that were made out of silicone, basically, so they wouldn't go bad in front of the lights and camera. So you had to airbrush things so that it looked super real. And while I was doing that, I was really interested in figuring out how to make things look real. But as soon as I'd done that, I lost interest in that. So visual effects has never really had an interest for me,
Hmm.
and I've always wanted to push it so it looks surreal
Yeah.
or unreal. Or so although I find deepfakes interesting, it's more of a, oh, that's an interesting technology. It doesn't really excite me creatively. But there are people I know that oh Mario Klinsman. Do you know him?
Not off the top of my head.
He was like known as a flash artist. Like, he was one of the people that did loads of coding and development with Flash.
Hmm.
And he's got into AI and machine learning and deep fakes and all that. And he's doing some really interesting creative stuff with it.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, so although it's something that I'd admire, it's not something that
Hmm.
interests me really.
I think it's one of those things I regret not having as much access to during the Arts Driver program, because having played with it now, I really think that because yeah, it's good at doing the realism side of things. But what I want to see is someone to use the tech and see what's possible, but doing some really weird stuff.
Yeah, you should look at
Start
Mario's.
swapping different offerings. Start swapping different types of faces and creatures, and having a look at what you can do. Because I think that is a computer generated medium that's quite interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
I think you'd really like Mario's work.
mhm.
Mario Klingsman is
Okay,
his
I'm
name.
writing that down now. And then the other thing would be stuff like style transfer and those sort of sides of AI image.
So, yeah, I
It's a
know
bit.
that Adobe Character Animator implemented some of that,
Oh,
and
of
I've got some
course.
of my. They used some of my sculptures for some of the styles.
Hmm.
So they
Oh,
asked, yeah, some of
nice.
the wood carving styles are mine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was an input that I had because I work a lot with Adobe on pre-release stuff.
Hmm.
So I not,
Yep.
can't say much about that other than
Is there any
it's something
pre-release
that I do.
stuff that is open yet to talk about? I don't know where we are. I
Well,
don't.
after the new After Effects came out yesterday or the day before, I
Ah,
think. So,
there we go.
but it'd been in public beta for a while, and
So
obviously I'm
it's,
under
yeah,
NDA,
so
so I
it's not.
can't talk about anything that's not been released.
Yeah,
So,
and they wouldn't be. Yeah,
but
but
um, yeah, Character Animator. I love Character Animator, and I think it's a really underrated, very
hmm.
badly marketed piece of software
Explain to me how
because
it works, what it does.
it's incredible. So basically, you take a character that you've designed in Photoshop or Illustrator that's on layers,
Hmm.
and you put it in Character Animator, and then you use your head and the webcam to animate the character.
Oh,
So you can
okay.
make it move, you can make it talk in time with your voice. You can set up MIDI triggers to control animations.
Oh, so you can have like a little launchpad thing to.
Yeah, and people use it live. You know the cartoon president thing that
Yeah,
was done? That's all done in
and it's
Character
sort of done
Animator.
live. That is
Yeah, so you
clever.
can. It's really clever,
Yeah, I've
and
seen
not
this.
many people seem to know about it.
I think the only time I've seen it used was for stuff like podcasts and things. Probably like this, just replacing the people with little moving at. A lot of like YouTubers use it for little avatar stuff. It's sort
Yeah,
of
but they've
base.
used it in The Simpsons and stuff like
Yeah,
that as
so it's
well.
got.
Yeah, and it's
Probably don't even
free with
realize.
your Adobe suite. You just go to your Creative Suite app, and you'll see Adobe Character Animator listed.
Hmm. Well, while we're on the topic of Adobe and sort of your relationship with them, I think we'd be quite interesting to hear about your time demoing for them at launches and things. Because
Yeah,
there's a particularly impressive photograph of you. Actually, it wasn't Adobe; it was the Final Cut launch at Apple. I think it was the photograph that really stood out. But that was a gate. I presume Adobe was a gateway to that one as well.
it was. Yeah. So it was quite a fluke, really, because so what happened was I gave up prop making, thought I want to do this full time. So I thought I have to give up that career and start a new one. So I gave it up, moved back to Scotland, and got myself a computer. Well, went on a IT course because that was the only course I could find at the time that taught anything about computers and creativity. And then I went to a party at a neighbour's house and saw they had a Mac. And I was trying to decide whether to get a PC or a Mac. So I knocked on their door, said, "Hope you don't mind, but would you suggest I get a PC or a Mac?" And he went, grabbed me, pulled me in, said, "Get a Mac and come in, I have to talk to you about it." And basically said, "If you get a Mac, I work for a company called Adobe and I'll get you a copy of Photoshop." And I was like, "Oh, Photoshop, that's the one that I saw being used." And I'd only used CorelDRAW and Deluxe Paint since then. So anyway, it was just pure fluke. So he got me a copy of Photoshop, and to thank him, I got a photo of his baby that had just been born, and I put a Mohican and a leather jacket on it, and Mum and Dad on its knuckles. And
This is your punk days as well.
yeah, and I gave it him, and the next day, and he was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you got Photoshop, and the next day you can do this." So he said, "Will you come and show the people at Adobe what you've done?" So I went to, there was an Adobe office in Edinburgh at the time. So I went there and showed them, and they said, "Oh, we've got this show coming up." It was called CGIX. It was one of the first CGI shows in Amsterdam. "Would you come and show what you've done in Photoshop?" So I went there and did that, really loved it, met other people that were doing that kind of thing. And then when I came back, I'd done it free of charge. He said, "Here, I know you want to do animation, so here's a copy of After Effects." And I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And that was it. I fell in love at that time. So then I did demos for Adobe right up until, I think it was about 2010 or something. I was regularly traveling the world doing trade shows and seminars and events.
It's certainly if you Google Angie Taylor, you certainly see a lot of you in front of seas of people, which to me would be.
It was mad, and I ended up writing books at that time as well on After Effects, and it was quite intense.
I remember Andy, who we had on last week on the last podcast. I remember when we showed him the list of all the Artsdriver residents, he like immediately saw your name and was like, "I've been to her events, I've read her book." I was like, "Oh, okay, we've got a celebrity incoming here." So that was quite cool to see the people in the Fusebox already knew you.
I forgot to put "has been" at the beginning of celebrity.
Oh, so how was your time? Because we spoke about the Artsdrive program, and sorry, I feel like I'm jumping timelines massively today. We're just jumping all over the place. But we've talked about your Artsdriver experience, but just actually, since we're on a Fusebox podcast, what was your time like at the Fusebox? You know, are there people that you worked with that really stood out? And like, has it inspired you to different ideas?
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was such a great opportunity to like collaborate with other people. And although I ended up not being able to collaborate on projects that I would have liked to in some ways, just because everyone was kind of so excited about their own thing, really. There were people there that really helped me with my project and really inspired me, Andy being one of them, and Maf J and Scott and you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and just being around that environment where everyone's excited about new technology, whereas normally I'm with my friends and they're just completely bored when I mention new technology, because I don't really have any friends that are in the industry. It's weird. I've got my friends that I've had for years and years and years, and none of them are really into technology or creativity in that way. A lot of them are musicians and stuff. And then I've got my geeky friends. So it was great to be able to have somewhere to meet and talk about that. And I really miss it, actually. So I'm hoping that once this gets back to some form of normality and once my income's sorted out, that I can become a resident again and start popping into the Fusebox every week.
We're following along, keeping an eye out when's the right time to start looking into what we have to do. But I've been into the Fusebox, been keeping the plants alive. That's about the. I'm shocked at how many plants we had in that office. They're everywhere, and I'm not the best person to be keeping them alive, but they're going. And I think it's going to be interesting looking at how immersive is going to be affected by this going forward, because I think until there's a vaccine, this idea of having an arts driver type program where I'm putting headsets on, introducing loads of people to VR, that's going to be, I think, suspended for a little while to come.
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose people are maybe going to have their own headset, or at least lease a headset for 6 months or something like that. Have a lease program, so that people have responsibility for keeping it clean and using it. And I guess, you know, the prices hopefully coming down eventually will help with that.
Yeah, I think actually we didn't talk about devices. So what do you what headset do you use at the moment?
What headset don't I use would be a better.
Yeah, there we go. What headsets?
Well, so I started off with HTC, and I still love my HTC Vive, and that would be my headset of choice when I'm using a computer. But I also have a Rift and a Quest.
There we go.
And a PlayStation VR.
Yeah. You've got way more headsets than I do.
I know, it's terrible.
It's work expenses.
I must say I don't like the Quest. I find it really uncomfortable. I can see reflection in it, and I can really see the eye tracking. And the whole online stuff I hate. So I really like the Rift. Even, you know, despite it being Facebook, and I try not to really promote Oculus because of that. But I guess the Rift and the HTC Vive are my favourites. I'd love to try the Valve Index, but my partner would kill me.
Okay, enough. Yeah.
Actually, the PlayStation VR is amazing. It's so comfortable.
So I haven't had much experience with that one. So yeah,
Well, the first experience was pretty horrific. I ended up choosing Resident Evil as my first VR experience. And there's this bit where you have to go up to this seedy, horrible camper van and open the door, and you just know there's going to be something hideous in there. And I couldn't do it. Even though I knew it wasn't real, I just couldn't do it. It was too much like, you know, one of those horrible reality crime programs. Actually, but the one thing that's amazing in VR on PlayStation is Dreams by Media Molecule.
Okay.
It's kind of like Tilt Brush and Masterpiece VR and Photoshop and After Effects all built into one application, and it's a game.
Am I gonna have to get a PlayStation VR just to try that one now? There's because there were a few PSVR exclusives that eventually came out on like the Quest and things. So I was kind of having my fingers crossed that everything eventually will be open, but maybe not there. There's the one thing you were saying is...
Well, it's actually... So, interestingly enough, I completely forgot because I'm unaware of it when I'm in it, is Dreams isn't actually available on VR yet. So you use you use the VR controllers, but you're actually just doing it in...
Oh, it's sort of a... Okay,
but it feels VR.
It feels immersive.
It's weird. And I think they are working on it being VR, so it will be VR eventually. So you could actually get Dreams without getting a VR setup.
You just need the controllers,
You don't need them, but it's quite hard to draw with a PlayStation controller, so it's easier with the magic controllers.
Okay, that's definitely another tool. One of the reasons we in the Fusebox we don't actually have a PlayStation VR in place because it's actually a lot of the equipment we have available is for development. And the getting a license to develop stuff for PlayStation VR was so challenging and infeasible at the time that it was almost pointless because no one could actually develop for it.
Might be worth chatting to the guys at Future Lab because they develop for PlayStation and they're based in Brighton, so they might be able to suggest.
It's mostly because we haven't got a studio license. You know, we want individuals to be able to experiment and try new things and create new things, not. So I'll have a look.
They might have a space that they might be able to make available to you.
Would be interesting
to go and try. Yeah.
And again, another prompt to chat. If anyone does have anything they want to ask, please let us know. I've got a couple more just to wrap up questions, but we still have time if anyone has anything they want to ask. I think we've covered a lot of the things you're working on at the minute, but is there anything else that you're doing at the moment to keep yourself busy?
Well, I'm still working on my Scattered Mind project, which I'm having difficulty getting finished because I keep...
Explain what that one is for people as well.
So it's a VR experience which is about living with neurodiverse conditions. So I have ADHD and Asperger's. So it's about finding safety and about the different worlds that are in my head, kind of thing. It's a very personal project, but and I kind of had these massive ideas about what I wanted to do with it, which are really way beyond my technical expertise in terms of Unity programming. So I kind of I've managed to build it so far, but I keep coming across technical hurdles with it.
Yeah.
So I kind of think it's going to be an ongoing thing, and it kind of feels like it should be an ongoing thing anyway. So I keep adding new. It's basically a tree that you go inside, and off each branch is a different world.
I mean,
And I keep thinking of new worlds that I want to add anyway. So
I mean, also it's a project about ADHD. That kind of makes sense.
yeah,
I quite like the notion of it being unfinished.
yeah.
Also, another thing is obviously
one of the worlds is the Museum of Unfinished Projects.
of course. Actually, that was the other thing. So there's people are now looking at needing to be able to visit, view, and explore like art without having to travel, without for social distancing. How do you feel about sort of VR art galleries and installations and things like that? Like for practical art being stored in a digital domain, I suppose.
Yeah, there's one called the Museum of Other Realities, which is really nice, and it's got some really amazing VR art in it. It's got stuff by Danny Bittman and some of the other artists that I spoke about earlier. And it's got a really good social aspect to it, where you can kind of be social, but be private.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure how it works, but I quite like it, because one of the things that puts me off is I do feel very anxious about social situations, and that includes VR social as well. I feel exactly the same anxiety about going to an event in VR. I'd be like really nervous. So yeah, I think what appeals to me though is being able, like, I've got like hundreds of friends on Twitter who I've never met, and being able to meet them in a space really appeals to me. So I've got Museum of Other Realities, and I went in once and got too nervous and came out again. But I'm gonna do that again. I'm gonna persevere. And I think I mentioned being nervous on Twitter, and there's all these other people who are nervous. So I said, why don't we do it as a group? So we're gonna create a nervous people group and go and visit the Museum of Other Realities.
It's made me think because we had our Brighton immersive meetup, which is an event where the community normally comes together to talk about immersive tech. But this time, because we're doing it virtually, we did it entirely in Mozilla Hubs, which is a browser-based application where you can socialize. You can be in VR on your desktop, and it was just a social event, so just a chance for people to chat and hang out. And a couple of people attended that event who were very, very, very nervous about talking, but gradually managed to sort of let them. They were typing at first, and we let them sort of start to talk, and we started getting people involved, and it was really lovely. And one of the things I realized is that I think during this lockdown we're finding a lot more of the people who, if we'd done a practical event, I don't think a lot of people would actually even attend it at all. So I'm really loving to see this like gradual transition. But also, if you are thinking about wanting to try these type of platforms, we will be running another social event in a few weeks' time. So keep an eye out on the Fusebox Twitter account, and any updates about that we'll be posting, because I think the Brighton Immersive community is one of the friendliest, nicest bunches of people to go and meet up with. And we had such a great time after the main part of the meetup was over. We started just going exploring together as a group. And there was someone had 3D modeled the Parthenon in Athens as it was originally. So suddenly us as a group going from having a networking meetup event with people, suddenly we're exploring like the ruins and looking up at the marbles and things. I was so amazed at this type of tool where some people had never met each other before and were really nervous, and now we're chatting and exploring together. I absolutely love to see that. And the last thing I want to shout out to is Andy Baker, who is making Gallery Ghost, which is another sort of VR-based multi-user art gallery. and that's another really cool one to see. So yeah,
Yeah, I'll have to check that out.
good one to look at.
The other thing about that is quite often the people who are like introverted, once you get them talking, they're quite often really interesting because they've bottled everything up.
Yeah.
So all this stuff comes out.
Exactly. And then I've got one last question from chat, which was from
Okay.
G2B Pro, who says, "Has Angie done any augmented reality work in addition to VR? Is that something that interests you? You want to look at, or
It's kind of interests me in the same way that I was talking about the visual effects. I think, oh, that's cool. It looks great, but I kind of like the separation of virtual reality from reality. I like being in that separate space, and AR it just doesn't inspire me at the moment. It's not to say it won't in the future, but the fact that you're still looking through a screen at the moment, I think, is what I just think, well, what's the point? I'm still looking through a screen.
And I
Maybe
mean,
if it was glasses or something, then it would be more interesting to
well,
me.
so we have the HoloLens at the Fusebox, but with the HoloLens, it was very much like business orientated. There were some like artsy gamey things, but nothing crazily artistic that I was aware of.
I kind of like, because all the marketing departments are totally focusing on AR, so I kind of like doing what they're not
going the
looking
other
at.
way. Yeah. If there's anyone wanting to have a look at AR and just something quickly that they can play around with, there is an application called Doodle Lens, which I'm quite fond of. It involves you just draw sketches on. Actually, Angie, this might be your gateway. You draw sketches on a piece of paper, and then you take a picture of it, and it converts it into. It makes it transparent, so it gets rid of where the paper was and makes it like a alpha image, and then you can place it in the world in AR. So you can start like taking all your drawings and putting them up around you, so they stay static where they're fixed in the world. So you can start labeling all your cupboards in your house, whatever you want to do. But that sounds like the most boring attempt of a really artistic thing. But you can do multiple images and make stop motion with it as well.
Right.
So you can actually take a desk scene, draw lots of stickmen, and then have your stickmen like climbing over your keyboard or running along the monitors. And you can make this little short film, and then you record the screen. So you make a short film going around and filming all the different elements in one. And that was all done through AR, and it's using AR to do sort of a more of a something which would require visual effects or would require like some kind of like compositing at the very least.
Yeah, there's the guys at Ram Jam in Brighton they're doing some great stuff with AR. So I think what they do is amazing, and I love it. And I think if you're interested in that, there are some amazing things you can do. It's just doesn't personally excite me the way that being in VR does.
Fair enough. Okay, and with that, I think that's all my questions out of the way. So the last thing I have to ask you is, how do people find out more about you and your work?
You can go to, so I've got a couple of websites. I've got angietaylor.co.uk, which is my own website, which hasn't been updated for quite a long time. Or you could go to creativecabin.co.uk if you want to find out about courses and training, and I've got some free tutorials on there. I've also got a YouTube page. So if you search for Angie Taylor tutorials YouTube, you should find that. I don't know the URL. Twitter, I'm always on Twitter, and that's where I share quick links and things like that. So I'd love to hear from people. Any questions you've got that you didn't feel you could ask today, feel free just to kind of get in touch and ask me.
Yeah, and this is going up on YouTube now, so if you missed anything from today, you joined late, you should see it up on YouTube within the hour. And then anyone watching on YouTube, if you do have questions for Angie, get in touch through Twitter. It's really nice to see the conversation follow on after these as well.
Yeah, and anyone that's not familiar with Fusebox, I really recommend connecting with Fusebox and keeping updated with all the events they're doing, because it's, like I said, Fusebox has really changed my life, and I'll be ever grateful to Chris and the team there for that.
Thank you very much for that. And so actually, to reverse plug, if you want to stay up to date with all the events that we're running, We're trying to run an AMA every 2 weeks or so. We've got Brighton Immersive events regularly, and we'll be sharing insights on what our residents have been working on like during the lockdown as well to keep themselves busy. So please, follow us on Twitter, stay up to date, and thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Angie.
Cheers, Chris.
If you stay on the line for a second, Angie, I'll be with you in a moment. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.